So, after the, well, quite frankly, not my words, but the Department for Leaving the EU itself's own words, quite frankly, embarrassing leak, showing that under every scenario we will be worse off, how then can people argue that leaving the EU is a good idea? Quite frankly, it can't, because the economic case against Brexit is absolutely unarguable. It is absolutely unarguable. It's just flat out, you can't do it anymore, particularly after that last paper. And not only that, remember, this comes directly from the Department of Exiting the EU. It correlates with the Scottish one, the one that Scottish Parliament did. Also, the one with the one focusing on the City of London that the Mayor Sadiq Khan published. So, where do you go from here? And Ian Dunt as well in the on politics.co.uk. This is his argument as well. So, in truth, the BuzzFeed leak doesn't tell us anything we already didn't know. And that is exactly true. First line, bang, straight through. We knew this was going to hit us economically. We knew we would be worse off. Anyway, he continues. It's a bit less severe than the Treasury's analysis before the referendum, but it's playing in the same sandpit. It's broadly in line, if a little more moderate, than most of the analysis conducted before and after the referendum. The important thing about the leak, it is not really what it says, but where it comes from. It was birthed not by a Remainer alcove of the Treasury, but in the Department for Exiting the European Union itself. And still, to this day, well, I say still to this day, but if you go and watch my last video about the leak, you will have people saying that paper, the information that was leaked, is fake, even though the Department for Exiting the European Union has said, yeah, it's true, it came from our department. Because people don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that they are going to, you know, cut themselves. So anyway, it continues. This didn't happen by chance. As Robert Patterson reported, the work was collected from various departments via the Government Economic Service and the analysis done by the economics team at the Department of Exiting the European Union. They've asked Secretaries of State to bring their own department chief economist to any presentations if they want assurance of them challenging the findings. Some of the standard Brexiteer attacks have already been used against the leak. That no one listens to experts anymore. That the future is impossible to predict. That Project Fear doesn't work. Blah 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 blah. We've heard it all before. Maybe it's true. But be that as it may, it works. That this work is bulletproof in terms of its sourcing. It has impeccable Brexit credentials. Unless we are going to give up on the idea of governments trying to work out what the impacts of their actions are, we will want and always want reports like this. And that is absolutely true. Because if you are saying that this is fake, then what about the next government report that comes out? Is that fake? It's reached a kind of consciousness that would be expected by anyone following the detail of the debate so far. Brexit will impact the UK negatively in every sector, in every part of the country. A soft Brexit inside the customs union and single market would reduce the GDP by 2%, from what would have been over the next 15 years. A hard Brexit outside both, with a comprehensive trade deal, would give us 5% over the same time period, and a no deal onto WTO terms would reduce the GDP by 8%. In the way, the numbers don't look that big, which is true. And I've seen someone say that on that comment on my comment section. Oh, 2% is nothing. But they are very frightening. Even 2%, as the New York Times Paul Krugman, who predicted them with impressive accuracy before the referendum, said, quote, 2% is a lot. It's very, very hard to come up with policies that will make a country 2% richer in perpetuity. You have to have a very good reason to leave the EU to be willing to make a big sacrifice. We've spent a lot of time debating the merits and the likelihood of a trade deal with the US in recent months, but the leaked briefing confirms that this deal would offer comparably tiny marginal gains of just 0.2% in the long term. Why is this number so low? After all, the US is a massive economy. There are a number of reasons. First is distance, and I've made this argument before. The depth of it has been overstated. The only things that stays true, no matter what aspect, what aspect of trade you're talking about, is that the further two countries away are, the less they tend to trade. It's obvious why that would be the case for goods. It is expensive to ship them, and a lot of food will go off while you're doing so. But it's even the case for services. Even in an internet age, most services, whether it is architecture, law, or management consultancy, or whatever, will require you to go to the place you're delivering it. And most trade deals are not that extensive. You are completely wrong if you think that the US is going to say, "Oh yeah, come on, Britain can now have access to the US financial services." That is never ever going to happen. They certainly bear no comparison to the single market and customs union, which basically takes a bunch of economies and melds them together as if they were all one country. The government is fast running out of excuses. They can't say the report is a work of typical Remainers, because it literally did the work of the Department of established to leave the EU. It can't say that these big glorious trade deals outside Europe will take up the slack, because the work says and shows they won't. So instead, it has to be argued that the report doesn't really matter, because it does not take into account its preferred option, which is a bespoke trade deal. This argument was loyally reported by the BBC as balance, without an effort to explain to readers why it is misleading. The reason why is because the European Union has categorically said since day one, even before the referendum, the UK will not have any of its special arrangements or anything like that if it decides to leave the EU. So, as Jonathan Potes pointed out this morning, any deal the UK gets will be worse than the soft Brexit option, by virtue of the government's own definition. After all, it is trying to effectively stay in the single market in some sectors and diverge in others. It follows that the deal would be less comprehensive than staying in the single market and customs union altogether. So if it is secured, it is going to hit the GDP by more than 2%. But of course, this is a laughable, naive summary, because they are not going to get that deal. The EU has been clear and throughout that it won't allow cherry picking of the single market, which is exactly what I've just said. It is simply not going to allow the Brexiteers to offer mutual recognition, a posh term of promising someone you'll stick to the rules, because it would undermine the entire purpose of the single market. Unless you are part of the institutions following EU law, you aren't treated like you are. To Brussels, the British position is like saying, I want the brown shoes, but I want them to be in black too. It is a constant restatement of mutually incompatible positions. This is the first dismantling of any economic debate over Brexit. We'll now be told the economic argument doesn't win political campaigns anymore, but that Brexit is more about identity than it is about finances. Maybe all these things are true, but my take is somewhat different. People prioritise identity over economics when they no longer believe you in the latter. But regardless, the situation has not changed. The identity debate must still be won, and yet, for all it is worth, the money issue can be put to bed. It was not Remainers who finally settled it, but Brexiteers themselves. And that is exactly what I have been saying since day one in all these videos, right? The economic argument is far superior, I would say, to anything else. But you constantly get, and you've seen this in Sargon's videos, where he constantly bangs on about sovereignty and immigration. Well, the immigration argument is also put to bed, because the immigration from the EU makes up about 12% of our total immigration. So as far as I'm concerned, everything is put to bed.